guys, it's Julie Spencer, author of the Buxton Peak series. We are getting closer to the end of Buxton Peak, Book 2, Center Stage. We are starting into Chapter 9. This is called Who's Ian Taylor? Are you still in bed? Megan opened the door to the hotel suite, bathing the room in light and startling Ian out of a lazy sleep. He stretched his arms and sat up halfway to smile softly at his wife, then fell back onto the pillow, burying his face in the soft linen. I think I've been sleep deprived for months, Ian mumbled, barely lifting his face so she could hear him. Maybe years. That's what happens when you never take a break from touring. Megan slipped her backpack off her shoulder and let it clump to the floor, reminding him how much homework she needed to tackle. Ian made a mental note to avoid bothering her while she studied later. The end of his European tour meant some time off, but he was already starting to feel bored. Megan was always either in class, at the library, or with her study groups. He was trying not to feel jealous. He was the one invading her life, after all. She only had a few days of college left, then he'd have her all to him. He'd have her all to himself. Hey, my dad called, Megan said. She climbed onto the bed and pushed him over a bit. He said my Uncle Dave has a duplex we might be able to rent. He just built it, and we'd be the first people to live there. I thought maybe we could take a drive out there with Kai and Rhonda and check it out. I would love to get out of this hotel room, Ian said. He pushed himself up on one elbow, suddenly more awake. Can we go right now? You should probably get a shower first, Megan wrinkled her nose. Do I smell that bad? Ian lifted his arm in mock horror. And maybe shave. Megan reached over and roughed her hand across his cheek. Ian grabbed her hand and used it as leverage to whip her around and pin her to the bed, scraping his scruffy face against her neck. Megan doubled over laughing, trying to get out from under his tickling. Gross! Get off me! You're scratchy and stinky. Honeymoon's over, huh? Ian stopped struggling, but kept both her hands pinned down on the bed. The gleam in Megan's eyes assured him it definitely wasn't. He leaned down and placed one slow kiss on her neck, then pushed off the bed and strode over to the suitcase, digging through to find some clothes. I'll call my uncle and make sure he's cool with us driving out there, Megan said, scrambling off the bed. It's about 10 miles out of town, so I don't want to just show up. Megan sat down at the little kitchenette table, pulled out a textbook, and opened her laptop. She looked very studious, and Ian was momentarily distracted. He was tempted to ask her what she was studying, but decided to get in the shower and leave her alone. I probably wouldn't understand any of it anyway. Everything they'd talked about in her microbiology class had gone so far over his head it was embarrassing. Ian felt a foreboding sense of inferiority as he walked into the bathroom and set down his clothes. As the shower steamed up the room, he evaluated his reflection in the mirror. He tried to see past his appearance. Who am I? Megan was right. He looked scruffy. But he knew it was deeper than that. He was trying to identify some substance beneath his exterior. All he'd ever done was play music. He'd never excelled in academics and had no desire to go to university. Ian dug through his overnight bag and pulled out shave cream and a razor. Continuing to contemplate his importance in the world, he scraped 3 days of scruff off his face. Much better. He took a deep breath of humid air and stepped into a hot shower. A masculine-scented deodorant soap bathed away the essence of sleeping late. He let his head fall back into the steady stream of water and allowed himself to escape into something he understood. Words of his songs floated through his mind as he hummed along. Nonsense, drivel, nothing of any importance. Did I really write these? Then he thought of the song he wrote for Megan, Passing Through Eternity. Now that was special. Not just a reflection of his love for Megan, but an acknowledgement of his commitment to God. Again, he felt an overwhelming inferiority. God is huge, and I'm a tiny speck in his eternity, through which I'm barely passing. You're more than a tiny speck, Ian. Not a voice he heard out loud, a voice in his head, a voice in his heart. You're special to me, and I love you. Snap out of it, Ian, he chastised his inner turmoil. I am a child of God, and he loves me. Ian turned off the shower and reached for a fluffy white towel. He realized he'd probably soon be learning how to run a laundry machine. Interesting transition. Rock star to stay-at-home husband. Great. Hang on, I could hire someone to do the housework. Ian? Megan's face poked in the door, startling Ian out of his private conversation with himself. Are you almost done in there? My uncle said we could come as soon as possible, which is good because I have to be up at the library for my study group in about 2 hours. I'm almost ready, babe, Ian said. He pulled a towel across the mirror to wipe off the steam and looked at himself one more time. One more tiny pep talk. Who am I? I'm special in God's eyes. My wife loves me. My family loves me. My band loves me. My fans love me. I am Ian Taylor, lead singer of Buxton Peak. I may not be smart enough to succeed at university, but I'm a rock star. How many people can say that? He raised one eyebrow at himself and smirked. I'm a rock star. Well, the good news is I think Uncle Dave likes you enough to accept the very large security deposit you just offered and is willing to allow us to rent month to month since we're not sure how long we're staying. What's the bad news? I'm almost afraid to ask. Ian climbed into the passenger seat of Megan's car and clicked the seatbelt into place. The bad news is I'm late for my study group, Megan said. She raised her eyebrows and bit her lip. So, you either have to ride back to the hotel with Kai and Rhonda or go with me to the library. You've been meaning to show me the library, right? Ian shrugged his shoulders. You told me it was really cool and has moving shelves or something. Stacks, Megan corrected. They're called stacks. They're like long rows of shelves on tracks that move with a push of a button. And yes, they're very cool. Megan turned her head and backed out the driveway of the duplex that would soon become their new temporary home. I'm hearing a hesitancy in your voice, Ian said. The thing is, you can't distract me during my study group. You pretty much have to go sit somewhere else and wait for us. It could be a couple of hours. I can handle that, Ian nodded his head. I'll go explore the stacks and maybe even pick out a book to read. Then he thought, what could possibly be more boring than that? Megan smiled over at him and sighed as if she'd been worried that he'd be upset. Her shoulders relaxed as they got closer to campus. Ian watched out the window at the ever more familiar campus. The buildings sprawled amidst blossoming trees and grasses so green they almost didn't seem real. Michigan is beautiful this time of year, he thought. He craned his neck to see the 4th floor of the impressive rounded glass building before him. That's the library? Told you it was cool. Megan crept up and down rows of parked cars trying to find an empty spot and finally pulled into a space that looked out over another building. It was not nearly as tall as the library, but Ian felt drawn to it. The bricks were separated by parallel lines that almost looked like a music staff. Tall, thin windows extended up from the base of the building and were spaced at interesting intervals, almost like piano keys. What is that? Ian felt his jaw slack and gape open. He gulped and took a step toward the brick building and away from the intended destination of glass walls. That's the music building, Megan said. She came around the car and placed her hand lightly inside his, tugging gently. I'll take you there another day, okay? Promise? Ian whispered reverently. I promise, Megan said. I'm afraid if I let you go in alone, you'll be swallowed whole and I'll never find you again. Ian kept his eyes facing south as Megan pulled him west. He barely registered when they turned and entered the main corridor of the library, until he regarded the interior. The floor was a complex pattern of zigzags, and the lobby opened up to an atrium that reached all 4 floors and displayed balconies at each level. It was incredible. Students and faculty crisscrossed the cavernous room, barely interacting, a hushed reverence that encapsulated the space. No one paid them any attention until they reached the desk where Megan had to present her student ID in order for them to step through the portal. The bored gatekeeper barely looked up from her phone, but mumbled, Hey, Megan, you guys are meeting on the 3rd floor today. Everyone else is already up there, I think. Cassie, I want to introduce you to my husband, Ian. Oh, hey, I didn't know you're married. Cassie didn't really glance at Ian, only at Megan's left hand. I should probably buy her a ring one of these days, he thought. Ian looked down at his own left hand and realized he'd never even thought to wear one either. We got married over Christmas break, Megan said. What's your major? Cassie finally looked up at Ian and her eyes grew wider. I'm not a student, Ian said. His British accent hung in the air. He shook his head slightly and regarded Cassie with more interest. Thick black eyeliner hid what he thought were green eyes, but they almost looked fake, like she was wearing green contacts. A small piercing detracted from what was probably a pretty smile under the dark red lipstick. Bleach blonde hair sliced at an angle hung across her face and was tipped with purple. She was fascinating. Cassie took a deep breath and cocked her head to the side. Megan, your husband's hot. Yeah, I know. Megan grabbed Ian's arm and pulled him away. Come on, we're late. She has no idea who I am, does she? Ian whispered when they were far away enough. Cassie's pretty much always stoned, Megan said. She'd probably get along great with Gary. No way. Neither of them would ever accomplish anything again for the rest of their lives. They'd live together in a room painted black, graced by the colorful lights of a few carefully placed lava lamps. You're so funny, Ian, Megan chuckled as they climbed the long set of stairs. He continued to stare down at Cassie until they rounded a corner and faced a daunting second set of stairs. Don't they have an elevator in this lovely building? Ian gripped the railing as they climbed more steps. You need to get in better shape, Megan said. She reached over and patted his belly as if it were rounded and fat instead of the tight 6 packs of abs he was so proud of. He firmed his muscles under her hand and raised his eyebrows suggestively. The gleam in her eyes teased him as he turned back around, reached for his hand, and pulled him up the last few steps to the 3rd floor. In a little nook, a small group of students sat together with textbooks on the table. They all looked up when Megan came into view. One of the girls at the table jumped up and came running toward them, squealing quietly. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, you brought your husband! She was talking to Megan, but staring at Ian. Can I meet him? Ian took the initiative and stuck his hand out. Hi, I'm Ian. I know who you are, she said. He could hear the implied duh at the end of her phrase. You're Ian Taylor of Buxton Peak. Oh my gosh, I love you! She held his hand in both of hers as if she was planning to detach it and take it home with her. Thank you, Ian said. He pulled his hand away and placed it protectively back into Megan's. Ian, this is my classmate Gina. Nice to meet you, Gina. Ian kept his hand securely in Megan's and squeezed it gently. She winked up at him. Come on, I'll introduce you to everyone else. The 2 other girls stood up and reached out to shake Ian's hand with gleaming eyes and excited smiles. But the one guy at the table narrowed his eyes and pursed his lips. Ian narrowed his right back, but reached across the table, forcing the young man to put down his pen and return the gesture. Megan didn't seem to notice the hesitancy in the exchange. She draped her arm through his and beamed at her classmates. She told him their names, but Ian only remembered one. Jared. I don't like him, he thought. Excuse me. Well, Ian's going to find something to read or explore the library or something while we work, Megan said. She finished introducing her husband, but knew she'd kept their study group waiting long enough. We took so much time house hunting and didn't get back early enough to drive him back over to the hotel, so he's stuck with me. I'm very happy to be stuck with you, babe. We were apart for too many months already. He pulled her close and planted a kiss on Megan's cheek. As long as you promise to take me to see that very intriguing music building soon. Ian craned his neck in that direction as if he could see it from here. There's a great view of the music building from this floor, Gina said. She pulled Ian's arm and tugged him in the direction of the floor-to-ceiling windows. Better from the 4th floor, but come look. It supposedly looks like a grand piano from an aerial view, but I personally don't see it. Ian didn't hesitate. His apprehension of being mauled by a superfan briefly overshadowed by the opportunity to see the music building. Megan noticed him shove both hands in his pockets of his jeans, probably preventing Gina from holding his hand again. While Gina played tour guide, Megan sat down at her usual seat, which Jared had conveniently kept empty for her, like he always did. You're moving in with this guy? Jared whispered through clenched teeth. Whatever happened to a long-distance relationship? We got married over Christmas break, Megan said. She chuckled. I take it you haven't seen the YouTube video. Your wedding is on a YouTube video? He sounded shocked. Jared picked up Megan's left hand. Why aren't you wearing a wedding ring? We just haven't gotten around to buying any yet. Megan pulled her hand away quickly and creased her eyebrows. What's it to you anyway? What kind of guy doesn't buy his wife a wedding ring? Jared scoffed. A guy who needs to keep his marriage a secret for a few months? Megan was growing uncomfortable with Jared's interrogation. A secret? Jared's eyes grew wide. I have been waiting patiently for you to get over this long-distance relationship so you'd finally go out with me, and you marry a guy who wants to keep your marriage a secret? That's just wrong. Jared, I was never interested in anything more than a friend, Megan said. She scooted her chair a little farther away. Plus, I deserve a little anonymity for a few months while I finish college. Ian walked quickly back and sat down on the chair next to Megan, glaring at Jared with vitriol in his eyes. Jared shifted away and seemed suddenly very interested in his textbook. He picked up his pen and readied it as if he were taking notes. Always the gentleman, Ian casually changed the subject. That music building is beautiful. We should go check it out tomorrow. I'd like that, Megan whispered. She opened her textbook and pretended nothing was wrong, even as she felt the heat rush to her face. There's a stack of magazines on that table over there by the windows, Ian said, nodding his head toward the table. I'll go sit over there and enjoy the view and relax for a bit while you all study, all right? Thanks for understanding, Megan thought. Megan bit her lip and looked him in the eye. Ian winked at her, glared one more time in Jared's direction, and stood up. Jared never looked up from his notes. Ian leaned down and kissed Megan lightly, then walked away. He is so dreamy, Gina said as she sat down. She didn't seem to notice the tension at the table. You are the luckiest girl alive. Thanks, Gina. Megan decided to brush off the incident and begin their study session. Okay, tomorrow's test is over the molecular proteins we observed in lab last week. Did you know your husband is flirting with 2 girls? Jared interrupted. Oh my gosh, he just gave her his phone number. They all looked over to where Ian was sitting, talking to 2 students who had sidled up next to his magazine-covered table. One of them had slid her notebook in front of him, and he was leaned over it, smiling and flirting. He's just signing autographs for them, Megan said. She laughed, and realization clicked into place. You have no idea who my husband is, do you? Jared creased his forehead and frowned. He glared in Ian's direction. Oh my gosh, you don't? Gina said. He's Ian Taylor from Buxton Peak. I don't know what you're talking about. Jared lifted his chin and sniffed dismissively. Who's Ian Taylor? What's Buxton Peak? Buxton Peak is like the coolest rock band ever, Gina said. Ian's their lead singer. I don't listen to rock music, Jared said. He glared back over at Ian as the 2 girls walked away. Ian looked back over at them, winked at Megan, propped his feet up on the chair, and picked up a magazine. He looked a little smug. I thought I was the only one, Megan said, chuckling softly. She turned back to her books and picked up her pencil. Nice to know I'm not alone in my ignorance. Going to your university last week was an interesting experiment, Ian said. He had been mulling it over for days, and they'd gotten moved into their new place, and the pieces finally clicked in his mind. I went out without a bodyguard and didn't get mauled. In fact, there were several people on campus who didn't even recognize me. I don't understand. How is that an experiment? Megan stretched her arms, cracking her back against the chair in the kitchenette. They had very little furniture in their duplex, but she'd insisted on a table and chairs. She didn't have class on Friday, so she hadn't left the room all day on condition that Ian would let her study in peace. She'd been so focused on her laptop and the textbook sitting beside it, she'd barely registered Ian was leaning against the counter watching her work. I've never tried to go anywhere by myself without being in disguise and with a bodyguard, or with a whole band and multiple bodyguards, Ian said. He decided to tease her a little. We could conduct a scientific experiment to see if I can go out in public without needing police protection. A science experiment? Megan pursed her lips and had a gleam in her eye like she was trying not to laugh. I'll play along. What did you have in mind? We should try going to the market together. He raised his eyebrows. Since we no longer have room service, we're going to need to learn to shop for groceries. I think I know how to shop for groceries, Megan said. She got up from the table and opened the nearly empty refrigerator, the contents of which proved she had yet to do so. Besides, going to Meijer in Mount Pleasant, Michigan is a little different from shopping in downtown Paris with your entire band and entourage. Well, then you can teach me, Ian said. Are you sure you want to test this experiment without Ed or James at least in the wings, waiting to jump out and help? Megan hooked her hands like claws and tickled Ian under his arms. He cringed away from her, trying to grab her hands and stop the torture. He quickly caught hold of her wrists and pulled her into a playful hug. Thanks to your matchmaking skills, Ed is on his date with your giraffe friend, Ian said, and James is in London, so you're going to have to be my bodyguard. All 5'3" of me? Megan pushed him playfully to prove her weakness and lack of ability to protect him, and he fell backward as if she'd muscled him to the ground. She laughed down at him and started to turn away, but he grabbed her ankles and pulled her down with him. You're a scary woman, Megan Taylor. He rolled her into his arms. See how easily you're able to overpower me? She pushed lightly against his chest. How could I possibly protect you from the screaming throngs of girls who chase you around the world? With you by my side, they'll know it's a lost cause and stop chasing me. Sounds good to me, she sighed. Would you like to go out to dinner with me after we go to the market? Ian asked. Really? She raised her eyebrows. Why not? He wrinkled his nose. Another experiment. Okay, if you say so. Megan sighed and tried to get up from the kitchen floor, but he pinned her back down playfully. We had a late lunch. His smoky blue eyes pierced into her. We don't have to leave right now, do we? I suppose not. Her thought trailed away with his kiss. That's the end of chapter 9.